if you're young and ambitious and you're looking to succeed and you're kind of struggling right now, whether maybe you had a breakup, maybe you're starting to lose some of your friends, maybe your business isn't taking off as fast as you wanted it to, whatever that might be, I hope this video provides you some value. Um, for context, I've over the last 2.5 years, I've built a number of companies, and if you followed me, you've probably seen a lot of my success. Built a couple companies to six-figure months, and had a lot of traction. But what I don't, I don't think is as common knowledge is I've over that time had to start from zero 3 different times. And I think when you sort of get started, you have this vision in your head of like, hey, once I get going, there's no going back. And the truth is, like, you're going to have setbacks along the way, right? You're going to have your peak months, and then the next month might be significantly lower for you. Entrepreneurship's not a linear journey, and so just want to share some stuff I learned and kind of got reminded of. I had a conversation with my buddy Oliver today. The first thing he kind of talked about, which I think was super valuable, is he's talked about how like rushing success when you're starting something new uh, is never a good idea because it generally ends up pulling you farther from it. And what I mean by that is it's easy if you've been getting working with people and then you either lose that momentum or you're just starting out and you see people your age that are just making tons of money, succeeding. It's really easy to look at that and be like, I have to catch up. And what that can cause you to do is you get too obsessed with the outcome. A lot of the most successful businesses need to build slow first so that you can then build fast. And when you get too obsessed with like the speed of the result and getting there as quickly as possible, what often ends up happening is you actually slow down, or you sort of put the business at risk for its overall success, because you're just so obsessed with hitting a number or getting a certain outcome. Now, I don't want to mistake this with like, hey, be overly cautious and don't take risks, because that's not my point at all. But um, what can happen is, especially if you've been making money or you see other people making money, you can start to look at things on too short of a timeline. Like, oh man, this week I didn't make as much as I could have. This month I didn't make as much as I did last month. And you start to get too obsessed with short-term wins when you really want to build for the long term. The most successful business people I know don't look at business on day by day, a week by week, even a month by month. They generally look at the business on at minimum quarters, and realistically at full business cycles, which are multiple years. And that's something that's really hard to do when you're young and you're getting started. But once you reframe that perspective of like, hey, there can be people with a lot of motion right now that are getting a lot of traction, they're making a ton of money. Uh, and especially when you feel like you're comparing, you're like, oh man, I'm not doing that. Remember, like, business is a long-term game, right? Most of us, especially if we're committed to success, are going to be doing this when we're 60, 70 years old, probably, right? And oftentimes the person that leads in the beginning isn't the person that's leading towards the end. And so, just remind yourself that, hey, I'm on my own path, right? And I'm just going to pay as much attention as possible to doing the inputs and not obsessing over the outcomes. I think that often will serve you better in terms of actually hitting your goals and really actually having the success that you want to have. Now, the other thing we talked about, which I think is really valuable, just making sure that you don't get too caught up in things that don't matter that much, is actually gauge your attachment to material things. If you make a lot of money, there's nothing wrong with buying a lot of stuff. If cars make you happy, get the cars. But for me and him in this instance, we're both quite happy with a simple lifestyle. Neither of us really crave the Miami penthouse, the supercar, or anything like that. I'll occasionally, like, I like my watches. That's one of the few things I spend money on outside of my business. But even those hold value. And we were just sort of going back and forth, and it's like one of the things that happens when you start to remove your attachment to material things and, oh, what can money buy me, is you become a lot more dangerous as an entrepreneur, because if you have nothing to lose, you have everything to gain, right? It sounds simple, but a lot of these bigger guys that are making a lot of money and have the flashy lifestyle on Instagram, guess what they also have? They have a lot more to lose, and they have a lot more to risk, and because of that, they're often not going to make as many sort of daring plays as someone who has 1 to 2K a month in expenses is able to make. And so, especially if you're in your early stages and you're not seeing the traction you want, especially as you start to get motion, which I promise you will if you do the inputs, um, don't don't let like lifestyle inflation happen. It's always going to happen to a degree, but don't start just like spending money because you're making money. Use that and start to build your sort of your nest egg, if you will, where you start to save up money and see that build, and it provides you more and more security. Because if you put yourself in a position where your living expenses are 3 4K a month, or less sometimes, especially if you're splitting costs with other people, with housemates or whatever. Um, you have way less to lose, and you have a lot more you can risk and put into the business. And I think the people that realize that and don't sort of cash out too early and continue to live a little bit more of a low key lifestyle while they're building are the ones that long term are going to see a lot more success. So especially those people that are all flashy on Instagram, remember, like, those guys probably go to sleep a little bit nervous about, well, if everything does fall through, I've got, hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt that I'm responsible for. I've got all these things that I can lose, and going back to a plain lifestyle is a lot more painful after you've experienced, a little bit more of the high life. That becomes your new norm. So, and the last thing we kind of went, and discussed on is, like, realize the world's not, like, unfair, right? You get rewarded for what you put in, and it's not always going to be linear over a week or a month timeline, right? You might, everybody has a different sort of timeline and journey that they're going to follow, but remember that the people that get success, there's an element of luck to it for sure, but they've also do the inputs to get there. And oftentimes when you start to reflect and look at, like, your day to day, you'll realize there are more things that you can be doing, right? That you're often not fully capped out on your inputs every single day. And, you know, you kind of realize, well, I want to gauge what type of life I want to live. Maybe I don't want to be grinding 12, 14 hours a day every single day. Maybe that's not the life I want to live. And that doesn't have to be, right? You can get a really decent level of success uh, working more comfortably, but you just realize it'll take longer, right? And so I'm not saying one way is good or bad, or you should go one way or another, but I do think it's worth realizing that, like, you don't have to speed run success necessarily, right? There's not this massive amount of urgency. Now, I do think you should take action and do inputs, and you should feel motivation to move things forward. If you don't, it's tough to get success, but uh, realize it can happen over multiple months, multiple quarters. Nothing happens overnight. I think people get caught up in that, looking at people seem to just blow up overnight on Instagram or, whatever. And so just remind yourself that there's a journey for you. It's your own journey. It's your own timeline, and it doesn't necessarily have to match somebody else's. So, a couple of simple points. I hope that if you made it this far, you got some stuff that's relevant to you, and maybe some value, and maybe a little bit of comfort in the fact that you're not behind, right? Everybody has their own journey, their own timeline. And if you look at yourself in comparison to the vast majority of people your age, especially if you're the type of person that's watching this video, odds are you're pretty far ahead. So just, I think, a good reminder. And last thing I'll say is stay off Instagram. It will make you compare to so many other people and just bring down your sort of personal value in your own mind. At the end of the day, it's you versus you, and that's going to be what what guides how much you do and what success you achieve. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.